Hi everyone, this is Sukanya.
And I'm Shreya.
And we are back with yet another episode of Intersectional Feminism Desi Style Season 3, brought to you by Feminism in India.
So today we're talking about something that, is rarely talked about. Yes, it's the big S word. Sukanya, whenever, the first time I heard the word sex and I wanted to look it up, I went to the dictionary, and the first, in the dictionary, the meaning or the definition that is given is penetration, penis enters vagina. But we all know that sex is not limited to that and is much more than that. Anything related to sex, especially in our country, be it sex, sexuality, sex education, anything that has those three words in the beginning, eyebrows are immediately raised. And if you're a woman, then there's no going any way. So, even when we see pop culture or any sort of depiction of sex, it's in such a titillating manner. And we don't talk about the actual, we've stigmatized it so much that we don't talk about the real information that needs to get out there. And we don't talk about sex education despite it being mandatory to be included in school curriculum, and still looked at as something so wrong. And most of the people get their information about sex like how I got it, through a dictionary meaning, or through porn, or through movies that at most times the depictions are not correct, rather than sitting down with a sex educator and understanding what it is. What do you feel like? Have you also had something similar sort of experience when you came across the word sex?
Absolutely, Shreya. Absolutely. I also feel that we get our information about sex from so many wrong sources, and then that misunderstanding just cements over time. And there is a big and immediate need to destigmatize sex and sexuality and look at it from a more comprehensive, inclusive, and pleasure positive outlook. We have with us today, for you, our listeners, we have with us today someone who has built a career in sex positive content creation and sexuality education. She established her YouTube and Instagram platforms in 2017. And since then, she has attempted to debunk and normalize discourse on sexuality, sexual health, gender, and body image with a particular focus on women and the pursuit of pleasure. Today, we have with us someone whose work is breaking new ground, and she's one of the most popular and followed sex positive content creators out there on social media. Please welcome the lovely Leeza Mangaldas, who's here to tell us more about building a career in sexuality education and the gender stereotypes that she has encountered in her journey. Hi, Leeza. Thank you so much for being with us today, and a big warm welcome to you.
Hi, Sukanya. Hi, Shreya. Thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
We're so happy to have you here, Leeza. So I'll just straight off begin with the question. So the first thing that I obviously wanted to ask is, how sex and sexuality are often less explored from an academic or, information-oriented point of view. Our general response, like I already mentioned, to these topics are often through a pornographic, objectifying, and in a more titillating manner. Given this social context, what made you decide that sexuality education is what you want to build a career in? And if you could also tell us a little bit about your journey in this profession.
So I actually studied literature and visual art at Columbia, and my focus was on gender and sexuality. So I've always been really interested in sexuality and ideas around sexuality and how they've been explored creatively, historically. That was the focus of my academic work in college. But at that time, I didn't necessarily know already that I would be a sex educator. I thought maybe I would try and do journalistic work or writing around the subject from a more academic perspective and things like that. But honestly, when I moved back, also when you're 18 years old, you think you're going to change the world, and you have all these big aspirations of like how your career is going to go or whatever. And then you're confronted with the very stark reality of like, you have to make money. and pay rent and, the stuff you have to do to make ends meet. And it might not always be exactly what you wanted to do, So trying to, and 10 years ago, the internet wasn't a place where you could have a career quite in the same way that it is now. It was, or maybe 11 years ago, I'm 32 now, 11, 12 years ago, it was not, being a YouTuber, being an Instagram creator or something was not yet considered a viable career. So I was working in more mainstream media at the time, hoping that I could do the kind of writing and storytelling that I was more interested in. But, opportunities came my way that paid the bills that were not so closely aligned. I ended up doing travel and lifestyle shows and sport. I hosted a football league for 5 years. And I learned a lot. The skills were very transferable, but so often there was some dude making the decision of what this person can present, and then advertisers determining what you can talk about. And, so over time, I felt a bit like, wow, what I'd wanted to do and what I'm doing are a little bit, there's a gap, I'm going to try and bridge that gap by just talking about stuff that I care about on the internet. Because right around that time, like 5 or 6 years in, the internet was starting to be this place where anyone with a smartphone could, put their thoughts out there. So I just started my YouTube channel as a passion project in 2017. At that time, Instagram was a photo sharing platform. There wasn't really a video centricity there. So I started on YouTube. And actually, when I started, I was kind of approaching sexuality and relationships from a more theoretical and academic kind of view. And it was all in English. And I realized actually that, the more feedback I got and the more I was sort of able to create a community and people were hungry for this, a lot of questions were more basic, and people were like, wait, before we can think about all of this stuff, let's talk about the body. Like, how does the body even work? What is the clitoris? Before we can talk about like the politics of women accessing pleasure or how they've been denied autonomy, et cetera, like can we dial it back a little and get to the basics first? Because even thinking about all of this isn't possible if you don't even have the basics, right? And even in my own life, like navigating my own sexuality and sexual health as a young person, I felt like there was such a lack of adequate resources. Even the people who are supposed to be giving us this information, going to a gynecologist or trying to get contraception when you're unmarried, can be such a nightmare, And it was like, if my doctor's not even willing to be upfront about this stuff, what are we going to do? Like, you know what I mean? I feel like I came of age as I began doing this work and recognized more and more the gaps in my own experience, like my own accessing of all of this stuff. So it really just started as like a resource that I wish I had. I was like, let's just create the resource I wish I had, both from a personal perspective and from the my academic interests. And then it just grew over the years, and only very recently has become my full-time thing. It's only become sustainable very recently. So I would be, and who knows how long it'll be sustainable. You never know what tricks Instagram has up its sleeve. So I would say that it's not a career that is very easy to navigate, and not one that I even entered thinking it would become my career. Do you know what I mean? I thought I'd always have to do other things to make my living, and this will just be this thing I do because I like doing it. But so there's perils to monetizing your hobby, but the pandemic made very little other work possible. So I was grateful that I had this digital thing that I was doing, and suddenly it just grew really exponentially with reels, and I had the time to make Hindi content. I just had time because I didn't have any, even though it was very anxiety inducing because I did not have the work that I used to be relying on for an income happening anymore. I felt like I'm just going, what the hell else am I going to do? I'm grateful to be safe and well and in a house, and I'm just going to put out sex education. And I guess people, I don't know, there's a moment for things, I feel like 5 years ago, there were less people willing to listen to this stuff, or feeling like it was, maybe people have managed to dismantle some of that shame. I think Gen Z is maybe a little bit less sort of burdened with the type of gender stereotypes and expectations and shame than even my generation was. So I don't know. I think there's a slight, lots of things happened. Me Too happened. Section 377 was repealed. I feel like even though these are baby steps, the public consciousness maybe was like galvanized into appreciating the fact that there are real consequences to not talking about this stuff, Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. I've talked and talked and talked.
Absolutely not. So like you said, there has been some sort of a visible shift in our collective outlook towards sex and sexuality and bodies and everything. But even when we say that, the word sex is still taboo in our society. And I would like to understand that you, especially being a young woman who puts out content in the public sphere about sex and sexuality and related themes, do you face, cyber shaming or cyber sexism or sort of harassment because of your own gender and for being open about topics related to sex, especially being a woman? So, how do you how do you like insulate yourself and deal with the emotional and mental impact of putting yourself out there with content that is usually, not very well or healthily received, so to say?
So I've got to actually admit that I am extremely pleasantly surprised by how supportive people have been. I think that the overwhelming majority of people have been like, thank you for doing this. I get messages like, thank you, Didi, this is so helpful or so informative or whatever, or thank you for talking about this. So I would say that overwhelmingly, people seem to be on board with the idea that sex education matters. Of course, there is the occasional, troll or somebody who slut shames you or kind of like insinuates that a woman, unmarried Indian woman shouldn't be talking about sex, or that women don't, what kind of a shameless woman would be doing this work or whatever. And I feel like just for existing as a woman on the internet, you get so much ridiculous commentary, whether it's about your appearance, slut shaming is like the easiest way to attack a woman's character that mostly men resort to. But anyway, so I feel like I have a thick skin and I try not to let it affect me. But I would also say that the fact that it is, for every 200 messages of support, there'll be 1 or 2 messages of slut shaming, or I don't know, some triggered man, enraged that an unmarried Indian woman is having pleasurable sex and talking about it or whatever. So I feel like, I can't really take that, criticism. I don't let the misogyny that sometimes comes my way. I feel like instead of letting it get to me, what am I going to do? I'm going to restrict and block. I'm going to also limit my own exposure to some of the stuff. Like I'm just at that point where it's really hard to be on top of my DMs. I would have to just do that all day, So I try and create calls to action where I do have the opportunity to engage with my audience, or like figure out what questions they might have by putting out a question sticker being like, if there's the topic you want me to talk about, enter it here or whatever. But it's hard for me to on a daily basis, like keep up with the amount of stuff that comes my way. So I feel like at one level you protect yourself as well. Like, do I want to see dick pics? Not really. Do I want to be, on the receiving end of whatever, some people being like, can I fuck you? When you're putting your content out there, I feel like even if you are not talking about sex, you're on the receiving end of such messages. Unfortunately, quite like the streets feel intimidating to navigate alone as a woman, particularly at night. Sometimes the internet also feels intimidating to navigate alone as a woman, because simply by existing, you're often on the receiving end of unsolicited sexual or violent or misogynistic commentary, or threats or whatever it is. But I would say that, yeah, overwhelmingly it's positive. I do get slut shamed to some extent, or sexualized, just because I'm talking about sex doesn't mean I want to have sex with you, right? Some people struggle to make that distinction, or like people, I think the idea of a sex educator is like new to many people. And so, people will be like, are you a gynecologist? Are you a porn star? Why do you do this? And like, no, why does sex have to only be seen either as like pathologized and medicalized, or as, pornographic? I'm not saying that, with no disrespect to either doctors or porn stars, they're both great. I'm just neither of those two things. I'm an educator, and I also think that like everyone should feel like they can talk about sex. You don't have to be a doctor or a porn star to talk about sex, and lived experience also matters. I feel like people don't think that some of the stuff is just should be general knowledge. You know, everyone should know what the clitoris is. You don't have to be a doctor or a porn star to know that. So I feel like just normalizing has taken a while, but I've been doing this for 5 years, and I do think there has been a small impact. I would like to think that there has been, because many more people are also doing this work now, and many people have written to me being like, I saw you doing it, and so now I think I can do it. I would never have had the courage to publicly talk about this stuff until I saw you doing it, you know. And it's funny how with, I mean, I don't know, success or whatever comes some amount of respectability. So suddenly you're winning awards and you have some certain number of followers or media articles coming out about you, etc., etc. And then suddenly from being like the weird girl who talked about sex, you're the cool girl who talked about sex, you know. So it's a funny one, but I really think that instead of allowing for either the social media responses or the awards or any of that to really condition why you're doing what you like, I like to just remember why I'm doing this, and also that like I am a whole person. Social media is one aspect of my life, you know, to just keep some boundaries, I guess, and also a sense of self that's like a little removed from all of that, because otherwise you're at the mercy of the algorithm and, you know, approval from random strangers on the internet.
Leeza, like what you spoke about the trolling, and it's true that the response overwhelmingly has been quite good, but like the occasional people who are just not happy with anything, I suppose, that women are doing is always there. Like just reflecting on that and sharing sort of a similar experience. I feel not similar, I would say, but like somewhere close. I handle multimedia for FII, so we do also put up a lot of videos that talk about women's issues and women's sexuality and all. So I remember there was this one video that we were working on, which was on female masturbation. Obviously, like it's just. And the kind of like at some point, I think you get so desensitized to the hate comments also, because there were people literally commenting on how I look and sort of equating that with the fact that I was talking about something like this, that how, you know, it's of course I will have to masturbate in order to feel pleasure, because otherwise like, and I'm just like, I think that's okay. Like, I don't think masturbation is something that should be regarded as, you know, something, it's a either or option between a penis and or something like that. But like, what do you feel like? Do you also sort of get desensitized after a point, or do you like laugh at those comments? Like I had quite a laugh, so I just wanted to know what was your reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that people to be cruel in the way that they are, like so casually cruel on the internet. Sometimes, I mean, you know, there's like sarcasm or humor or dark humor. I'm all for that. And sometimes people, even though they're not being intentionally funny, just what they say is so ludicrous that you can't help but laugh. But also it's kind of sad, right? That like some dude feels entitled to make a comment on the size of my breasts, or like, I don't know, say something rude to other, you know, more than, I don't care what people say about me, honestly, because as you said, you get desensitized and you kind of like, you've decided that you're making content for public consumption and you can't control how people respond to that. But I feel like what's really sad is when other women say something in the comments, like they resonate with something I've said, or that, you know, and some person with a private account or someone who's not trying to be a content creator or like put themselves out there in that way is simply supporting something that someone like me or you or whatever has put out on the internet on our public pages, right? Let's say female masturbation, someone puts just a laughing emoji or a heart or something, and then, you know, lots of men will like DM or friend request that woman just because she's commented on a page that's about sex education or something, you know. And I think that behavior really bothered, like it just makes me so sad. It's just disappointing. Like, men will never fail to disappoint, you know. So I feel like if you think the comment section on my or your or any sex positive page is a place for you to like shoot your shot or try, and actually that's a euphemism. They're not shooting their shot, they're just being gross. Like if you think, you know, they think that, I mean, I think a lot of men think that women who talk about sex or are supportive of another woman talking about sex are easy or asking for it, or like it's somehow an invitation, I don't know, that they're entitled to sending a dick pic or sexually suggestive message, or even, I mean, you know, if someone has a private account, if you don't know them, why would you friend request them? Even that's kind of like unnecessarily invasive, isn't it? You don't know this person, they have a private account, evidently they don't want strangers following, you know what I mean? So I feel like just basic human decency, it's sad that that can be hard to come by, and that the tendency is for men to think that a woman who talks about, you know, I mean, good girls aren't supposed to like sex, aren't supposed to want sex, aren't supposed to talk about sex. So anyone who does is somehow you know, asking for it or whatever, which is such bullshit. But it's so exhausting. I mean, honestly, it's so exhausting that I find it easier to simply block and restrict anybody who's doing that to other people in the comments. So I feel like in addition to the ones that are automatically in English, a lot of profanity is already filtered by the platforms, but even in your local language or whatever commonly used words, if they're, you know, misogynistic or casteist or homophobic or anything like that, I don't think they deserve a place in my comments or anywhere, you know. And often I feel like other people should feel safe on my page. If I'm talking about something that pertains to queer experiences, or I'm speaking with a queer person, why should that person be on the receiving end of homophobia in the comments or queerphobia in the comments, right? So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like to some extent there should be no place for prejudice or profanity that is serving no other purpose but cruelty or hate. I think that platforms should do more. I think that we are very much entitled to do whatever we need to make our pages feel safe, and to keep other people who might be engaging with our page also feel safe, right? I mean, I feel almost a responsibility there. So yeah, I mean, I guess you do what you can, but to some extent you also do get desensitized, especially if it's just to me or in my DMs or whatever. What am I going to do? I have to spend my whole day blocking otherwise.
Right. So just taking away from what you just said, you know, being a sexuality or a sex educator, talking about sex and sexuality, a lot of people have different prejudices that come to their mind, like you have mentioned also, that you're easy or that you're available, especially when you're a woman, your jeopardies are, you know, like multiplied. So if you were to, like, you know, just sit and take stock of the top 3 stereotypes that you face as a, you know, like a sexuality educator or a woman who's out there and speaks about sex and sexual health and everything, if you were to like look at the internet and, you know, sort of pinpoint 3 major or 3 very, you know, widespread stereotypes about women who work in this field, what would it be?
I don't think there's that many stereotypes about sex educators, because most people don't know what a sex educator is. So it's not like they have some preconceived notions. It's hard to establish that you are a sex educator. Most people, as I said earlier, people wonder, are you a gynecologist? Are you a porn star? Are you just seeking attention? I don't know. See, I think that my content is not clickbaitish at all. Clickbait is when you say your content is about something titillating and ends up being about something else. I'm actually trying to take the titillation out of it a little, because unfortunately, currently anything in the sexual umbrella is considered titillating by default, when I think we should be able to talk about the body, sexual health, etc., in a way that is just matter of fact, like talking about the weather or a recipe or a, I don't know, whatever book you've read that you like, the same tone that you can talk about anything that's important and interesting and some, you know, of significance to you. You should be able to talk about this stuff too. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with content that's sexually titillating, but there should be the opportunity to talk about sex where the objective is also not to titillate, and people should be able to see that, right? I mean, it's so sad that even the body is just cast in a sexual light by default, right? As if we are not able to look at an image. I mean, female nipples are banned on Instagram, etc. So we can keep going, but there is room for discussion about sex and the body, etc., 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 where the objective is not to necessarily, you know, be used as an aid for sex or pleasure, but rather as a tool for educating or self-awareness, or so you can make more informed choices, or, you know, think more critically about the media you consume, or whatever it is, right? I feel like we don't allow for a lot of nuance, unfortunately, too often in almost every arena. It's like, there's only one way to see things, you know? And while sex can, of course, be very titillating, and there's time for that, and that I'm not shitting on that at all. I'm just saying, wouldn't it also be nice if we could talk about sexual health without blushing and feeling ashamed, and without it being titillating. Why can't I think anybody should actually be able to talk about this stuff. You shouldn't even have to be some brave, risk-taking, stereotype breaking like crusader to talk about this stuff. When it comes to mental health and sexual health, there's so much shame and stigma that simply talking about it is like a big deal, And I feel like it would be nice if we got to a point where it was as normal to address or seek or want medical care for a sexual health issue or a mental health issue as it is for any other health issue, because that's how common it is. That's how, like, how should I say that and it deserves to be a right, So I feel like to some extent, I don't know, maybe I've meandered a little bit from your original question, but I think there's not that many stereotypes around sex educators because the idea of a sex educator is foreign to many people, and sex is couched in this entertainment, titillation, male gazy way where you have to kind of make room in people's minds for the possibility for it to also be a subject of discussion in a context that is not titillating and that actually is quite vital, that has like real consequences on public health, on gender equality, or like this. I feel like it's unfortunate that we pit these things against each other as if one thing is like lowbrow and base and like massy or something, and this other thing is academic and boring, and it's either the UN version of sex or the porn star version of sex, and we shouldn't be pitting these things against each other. Actually, I feel like they're all connected and there's so much space for nuance, and it would be nice if we could think about all of it in a respectful way, and be open to talking about it. You know what I mean? And
right.
And so I'm not trying to make a hierarchy of like this is important and that isn't. I'm just saying there's space for all of it, and we need to sort of acknowledge that as if one thing is like lowbrow and base and like massy or something, and this other thing is academic and boring, and it's either the UN version of sex or the porn star version of sex, and we shouldn't be pitting these things against each other. Actually, I feel like they're all connected and there's so much space for nuance, and it would be nice if we could think about all of it in a respectful way, and be open to talking about it. You know what I mean? And
right.
And so I'm not trying to make a hierarchy of like this is important and that isn't. I'm just saying there's space for all of it, and we need to sort of acknowledge that.
Right.
Sex education is a thing. Yeah.
I think earlier you also mentioned about about how you came of age along with your interactions academically with sex and sexuality education and everything. So generally, whenever, please do correct me if I'm wrong, but generally when a woman decides, when she grows up and when she decides to choose a career or pursue a certain stream of study, there's always an assignment of a gender role. Like, maybe women can be teachers, or maybe women can do this, do that, not venture out into something like, something that's more out of the box for the majority of people around. So has it taken any amount of convincing either yourself or your family members or people around you, like, immediate people that you interact with, to sort of assert that this is what I want to work, with, and this is what I believe in, and I think this is important? So have you, like, how have that growing up, and how is that coming to terms, and sort of making peace with people and with your own decision to put yourself out there, talk about sex and sexuality, and also to rid yourself of the stigma, if any, that has been, sort of conditioned into you? How has that personal journey been?
I'm really, really grateful that my family has been incredibly supportive. Like, they've never questioned or censored or judged or shamed. My immediate family, who I'm like my parents, my siblings, my grandparents, I'm very, very close to. I feel like it would have been much harder to do what I do if they ever tried to stop me or come in my way or criticize, or, obviously you would want to have your parents' approval, or it would just be, even if you didn't want your parents' approval, it would be a logistical hassle to deal with backlash from within your own home, right? So I'm extremely grateful on so many levels that my family has never come in my way. And in general, all through my upbringing, that's something that I feel extremely lucky that they always were supportive of, like, us, the kids, doing whatever they want or contemplating whatever career choices they want or whatever, they were never like, you have to do this, or you can only do this, or you have to study this, or you have to get married, or there were no you have to for us kind of expectations in my house. So I'm really grateful for that. I mean, I think the assumption was there would be nice, like, obviously I've always wanted financial independence, and my parents were very supportive of like being proactive about creating a life for yourself, but there was no pressure to only these are acceptable careers and these are not, or you know what I mean. So they've been supportive throughout the journey, and I think that's made it much easier for me to do this. I also think that, I mean, because I had, as I explained earlier, I had like other work and this was a passion project. This isn't the easiest thing to turn into a career. I didn't even know that it would become my career. Career is also like a nebulous word because you never know how long you'll do something and whatever. I mean, I feel like life is long, and I hope I can do many things. And I've done a bunch of things that I've enjoyed. Also had many things that I learned in my journey as a mainstream TV presenter or whatever, that have been very helpful to content creation around, doesn't matter what the topic is, in this case, sex education. So I'm grateful for that. Who knew I'd be presenting football? But hey, everything I learned there actually has stood me in good stead to be able to create all my content that I create or whatever, So I feel like, I don't know, I don't like putting myself in a box in terms of like, this is what I am and this is my career and this is the only thing I'm ever going to do. I couldn't have really planned how things have shaped out, but when I look back, it all makes sense, and I'm really grateful that it worked out like this. But to a large extent, I've kind of had to teach myself to be a sex educator, because that isn't the easiest career to get a degree in or whatever. As I said, I studied I studied literature and art with a focus on gender and sexuality in college. I was really lucky to get a scholarship at Columbia to study as an undergrad, and I think that degree and that institution and all gives some gravitas to your qualifications, I suppose. But I don't have a degree as a sex educator, right? I was an RA while I was in college, and that's a resident advisor, and you are in charge of other students on the floor or dorm that you live in. And part of that involved peer sex education, consent training, discussion on contraception. So I did receive some training on like peer-to-peer sexuality education. That we had, like condoms on our door that people could take for free. I mean, everybody in this role would have that, so that contraception was always easily available, etc. And I think that it was really nice for me to come of age, have my very first few experiences, relationships, etc., in this context where things were so judgment-free and it was so easy to access sexual health resources, etc., etc. But when I graduated and came back, I realized, I knew before going as well, but I was much younger than, then you're in your early 20s and stuff, and having these experiences, you kind of realize that like, it isn't that ease of access is such a anomaly in the world. Most of the world, even getting condoms or something basic like that, isn't the easiest thing, right? Today, if you were to just walk into a store, it's still somewhat embarrassing at the pharmacy, especially as a woman, even in a metro or whatever, to be like, can I have a packet of condoms, right? So I feel like, I definitely think there's a responsibility when you're providing information. You have to make sure that it's factually accurate, that it's inclusive and just and fair. And there's so many ways that what you put out there sort of needs to be making a positive impact, not inadvertently making a negative impact, right? I feel very aware of that, and I feel like I created a curriculum for myself as soon as I sort of started making this content. I feel like I started to learn so much along the way and continue to collaborate with other people who know more or have lived experiences or expertise, whether it's doctors or people from certain communities, or whether it's activists or artists. Or there's no one person has all the answers. I was just like, let's create a platform where we can ask the questions. So yeah, it's been a real journey for me. It's not like I knew exactly how things would pan out, or like set out like in 1 year, this is what's going to happen. And then in 2 years, this is what's going to happen. No, it's been very sort of like serendipitous, but also, I mean, I do think that once things make sense in retrospect, but you might not have been able to quite plan them, you know what I mean? But when certain opportunities come your way, and if you end up being able to do what you love and make a living from it, then I mean, I feel quite lucky, you know.
That was really insightful, I would say, Leeza, because like as young adults, to have you create the content that you are creating and to have something to refer to at this point, I think it's extremely important for all of us. And I know Sukanya would also agree to this, like to have like there were generations who didn't even have the access to the sort of content that we do now, and you are part of that sort of range of creators who are doing that, and you're giving us that information that we need, and the correct information for that matter, and we do not necessarily have to go to our gynecologist and be embarrassed to answer the question whether we are sexually active in order to know what's happening. So I'd really say thanks to you for that. But I would like to end our conversation with this question, which is what would you say to young adults, who are in this space where they're questioning everything, they're questioning what is happening to their body, they're questioning what is sex, what is sexuality, and exploring it, exploring pleasure. What would you say to them about sex, exploring their pleasure, owning their sexuality? What is your message to them?
One message, I think there's so many things that I think it's worth keeping in mind. And you started this conversation with one of them, which is that sex is so much more than just penis and vagina penetration, right? I mean, I think that the heteronormative penetration-centric conditioning that most of us receive around what sex is can take a while to dismantle and kind of overcome, because that is the messaging we receive. But some people's sexual experiences may never even involve that combination of organs, right? And that's still valid. For most people with vulvas, penetration is not the most reliable route to orgasm. Clitoral stimulation, which is unfortunately always relegated to the realm of foreplay, an optional precursor to the main event, tends to be the far more reliable route to pleasure for people with vulvas. At least some amount of clitoral stimulation, whether alone or coupled with penetration, tends to be required to achieve orgasm, right? So wouldn't it be nice if our definition of sex was more inclusive of the pleasure and experiences of women and queer people, rather than centering it entirely around the penis? It's like erection, penetration, ejaculation. Sex ends when he comes. What if there is no he? Or what about me coming? And, these are things it takes a while to unlearn, because it's so deep-seated, the kind of messaging we receive, right? Even the word penetration, why isn't it called envelopment or cocooning or something, right? I feel like we get the sense that, women are supposed to only be passive and reluctant bystanders in this experience, where men are the active agents or participants. A man has to be aroused, a woman simply has to be present. I mean, that's ridiculous, that's absurd, right? But that is a message that is actively perpetuated in a patriarchal, heteronormative society. As I said, even to this day, I think most women would feel hesitant to say publicly, I like sex. I like sex is like a transgressive thing to say as a woman. How sad is that? So we're all expected to have it but not like it? What the hell is that? Isn't that absurd?
Absolutely.
That's still, I mean, even for me 10 years ago to have said I like sex, even though I like sex, would have been hard. It was a journey. I mean, it was easier to talk about stuff like, whatever, relationships or some kissing or how to talk to whatever, early on I was not able to talk about masturbation or something. It took time to feel sufficiently like I had let go of the sexual shame that you inevitably inherit as a citizen of this patriarchal heteronormative world, right? So I feel like there's so much unlearning that can help then make your experiences more joyful, more gender equal, and more free. So I think the learning is ongoing and infinite, really. But we should think about these things. You know, I feel like so often things will not sit well with you when you encounter such a situation where, let's say, your consent or your pleasure feels relegated to less of a priority than you wish it was, or when you find that your safety is kind of like seen as some big favor is being done to you by, let's say, the person with the penis wearing a condom or something. These things will not sit well with you, even if you don't have the training or gender education or sex education context or whatever to refer to. I feel like we should be sensitive to those things when we experience certain things, and you're just like, this is not how it should be. And unfortunately, we have to then go put in the effort to think about how we would like it to be. It's sad that sex education isn't just like in school or imparted at home or whatever it is. You have to go and put in this effort to do this work and educate yourself, because it's been systemically denied. Actually, our access to this stuff has been restricted, as opposed to providing this information so people can make more informed choices in their lives, and so people more likely to have consensual, safe, and pleasurable experiences, right? So I feel like it's sad that we have to do that labor is like, the onus is on the person who experiences it as something less than satisfactory in their sex life to figure out how to fix it, instead of giving you this information before you're even sexually active so that you're more likely to have an ideal experience. Sorry, I feel like this whole podcast, I have talked so much. I am rambling, but let's give a practical tip also. I feel like self-pleasure is such a wonderful gateway into sexual self-knowledge, especially for people with vulvas. Just like some of us are so unfamiliar with our own anatomy because, again, we've never been taught it. And acquainting yourself with your own anatomy and pleasure, I think, can be a wonderful way to feel more comfortable in your skin, but also more knowledgeable about what turns you on and what feels good. And therefore, both in solo and partnered experiences, you're more likely to have a good time if you're just familiar with your body. Maybe it'll even make it easier for you to communicate about your pleasure to a partner. And I think lube is an underrated, very easy addition to make sex more comfortable and more fun for almost everybody. So I would say that's it. Small tip, practical tip as well. Use lube.
Thank you, Leeza. This is such an exciting and informative exchange that we've had, and I also feel that the similarity of experience when it comes to intimacy is something that we stow away. Even intimacy, for that matter, is sort of walking around. Like it's such an umbrella term, and a lot of times we use words like intimacy, getting close, or like we use words that sort of sober down, and we just don't even use the S word, and we don't say sex enough. And even when we say it, we have this tendency to censor ourselves and feel like we're doing something wrong. People feel guilty. So in that context, to have a conversation with somebody who is so unabashed about everything, I mean, the complexities and the problems and the pleasures of embracing oneself and exploring oneself, that's really refreshing personally, as well as I'm sure that's how it has been for our listeners also. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this, for coming here and for talking to us and having this conversation. So happy to have communicated with you, and wish you all the very, very, very best for everything that you want to be and do going forward.
Thank you so much for having me. I so enjoyed myself, and I hope that this was as fun for you guys as it was for me, because I had an amazing time and loved talking to you.
We had a really, really great time, and I speak for the both of us. Sukanya has already said it, and I'm going to repeat and agree with everything she said. And thank you so much, Leeza, for doing this. That's all for today. We'll be back with yet another episode of Intersectional Feminism Desi Style Season 3 on your favorite streaming platforms next Thursday. Till then, stay safe and stay tuned. Bye.